Hello guys, this is Gabriel Falling from Team SK Gaming.
Anything you can do, I can do better. Is that you? Is that what you think? Because what I do is acquire fat stacks for knowing a lot about the game and get a lot of predictions right. So can you do those things? Well, here's your chance to put your money where your mouth is. And at ESP, Esports Pools, they now have ESP.bet, where you can actually go and you can bet on the games. So for the quarterfinals, for the round of 8 of PGL Krakow, the 11th CSGO major, you can go and individually on each of the games, you can bet which person you think will win the game, and they have the odds accordingly. You can make side bets within it, who will win a map, who will be the first to get the kills, etc. All sorts of different options. I'll be doing it at the end of this video. Now, in the quarterfinals of this major, first and foremost, this is easily the most disappointing quarterfinal draw I have ever seen in the history of the majors, because the first and second best teams in the tournament are both on the same side of the bracket. Now that's happened before. We had it happen, for example, at DreamHack Winter 2014, where LDLC and FNATIC were the two best teams in the world. They actually drew each other in the quarterfinals. The problem with this match, though, is that this is the clear match that not only should be the final, but it leaves open, because of so many upsets, a lot of matches where you're going to get teams who make top 4 who in nobody's universe would they be considered top 4 teams in the world. Like obvious ones would be FNATIC-Gambit. I don't know anyone would have those teams top 4. Immortals Big. Sure, Big's had a good tournament so far. Never been close to even top 10 so far. Never mind top 4. North versus VP. Those are both two teams that were borderline to even make the playoffs, but one of them is going to be top 4. In fact, one of them is likely, I think, going to go to the final. So there is a real chance we could have a world in which we have a top 4 that has like Gambit in it. We have a top 4 that has a team like Big in it. We have a team like North or Virtus.pro in the final. And basically, the real match a lot of us want to see, SK-Astralis, the potential final, like the reigning major champions in Astralis, the team that a lot of people think will be the champions of this time around, including myself, SK Gaming, playing in the quarterfinals. And many feel like whoever wins that goes on to win the major. So the two matches that I find most interesting in this round of 8 are going to be the ones that I break down in this video. And we're going to start with the lesser of the two. We're going to start with the undercard, as it were, but a very interesting and entertaining potential matchup in its own right, which is Gambit versus FNATIC. So, okay, yes, Gambit's made it this far before. They made it to the round of 8 in the last 2 majors. The E-League major, they had Zeus, they made it there. Obviously, they had to play against FNATIC, but a different FNATIC, the one that had Twist. And amazingly, FNATIC overcame them, basically with pure fragging. Gambit was still a pretty good team, but they just didn't have the it factor. They didn't have the star quality in the playoffs, and they couldn't win the series. Now, the one before that, ESL1 Cologne 2016, Gambit made it there, but it wasn't this Gambit. It wasn't Gambit with Zeus. It was a very different type of a Gambit, and they made it there back when we had the GSL system, and they won the 2 best of 1s. So kind of fluky, and famously, by the way, they played FNATIC as well there, but that FNATIC, which was this exact lineup actually, shit all over them. And that was the match where, you might remember, Flusher, I think it was, said in an interview afterwards, like, it didn't even feel like a quarterfinals of a major. It was like taken to be very arrogant, very disrespectful. But quite frankly, if you watch the games, FNATIC just straight schooled Gambit. It was really disturbing because Gambit didn't have great in-game leadership back then. They didn't have Adren at the level he's at now. They were a decent team, but they were borderline to even make top 8. This time around, Gambit actually comes in as the favourite. Meanwhile, you have FNATIC. Okay, FNATIC is a team where, ever since they got this lineup back together, sure, the first tournament was pretty underwhelming, DreamHack Vegas, but from there onwards, I think they've looked pretty good in terms of level of play. And when you watch the games, the results, yes, they haven't been good. Like, they kept going out of playoffs. They kept going out in the group stage and not making it to playoffs numerous times. But every time they would always be like on the bubble. They'd either lose from a tiebreaker, or they'd be the team that just lost the one game to not get through. But in those campaigns, they would beat a top team. They would be able to score a really impressive match against an elite level side, or they'd play a bunch of the games really close. And it would always be this one map that would let them down. Now, though, they've had the DreamHack Summer Run, where they went all the way to the final and took a map of SK, in fact. They had, obviously, this one here, where they made the round of 8, and doing so beating out G2, who's one of the teams who many people thought had a chance to go perhaps to the final, probably the semi-finals at least. Meanwhile, you go back over to the Gambit side again. Okay, yes, Gambit have been a great upset team, and Gambit have had the odd little run, like they won DreamHack Austin, where the only good team there was G2. Aside from that, though, we've never seen much elite from Gambit. They're not a team that have won many big best-of-3 series over top-ranked teams. They've had a lot of good wins on their classic maps. Traditionally, it was Cobblestone Overpass. In the last few months, actually, they've really expanded their map pool and gotten some classic wins over some very good teams, but they still haven't had that deep finish. Like, top 4 at a major would be by far the best result in the history of Gambit when you consider the stature of a major, and that only elite teams typically tend to go that deep within tournaments, or teams on inspired runs, like some of the Team Liquid teams of yesteryear. So, when we consider this matchup, even though Gambit come in as a potential favourite with a lot of the factors, Fnatic still have the experience aspect. So one of the ways I'm going to break down all the matchups is I'm going to go area by area. And I'm going to start with maps, like map pool strength. That's an area I've always been interested in. I'm going to go into what the likely map veto is. And then I'm going to go into the skill level of the teams, how I see them matching up in terms of playing ability, the style to some degree. And then finally, I want to do an aspect that's like, in theory, it's intangibles, but it's going to contain stuff like experience, other factors, like what kind of mentality perhaps the teams have, if they have the it factor, if they're clutch. And then we're just going to decide who's going to win these matches. We're going to look at all these areas and decide, and then overall come up with a verdict. And in doing so, I'll tell you what I actually think will happen. And then I'll if there's one that I'm going to go against, maybe I'll go with my gut. So for Gambit Fnatic, let's talk about Gambit's map pool. So Gambit was a team which, when you went back to tournaments like Star Series, you looked at them and you were like, yeah, this is a pretty good team. Oh, wait a minute. They basically only win on Cobblestone and Overpass. And they had this period of time where their record on Cobblestone and Overpass was something like 8 wins, 1 loss. And their record on everything not Cobblestone and Overpass was like 1-7. So they were drastically limited in their map pool. And once everyone figured that out and teams stopped playing on Cobblestone and stopped letting the Overpass come through, all of a sudden the wins dried up briefly. And there was a reason why we didn't have any progression from the big upsets in the playoff performances to have big tournament wins. Now, that has changed. Thanks to having Zeus, one of the best in-game leaders to ever grace any version of Counter-Strike, but in CSGO, I'd put him easily top 5 of all time. Like, I think he's a better in-game leader than, for example, someone like Happy, who's won many more tournaments and many more majors. So he's a guy where he's had teams that have always gotten good map pools and always expanded their map pools and always been able to play a bunch of different maps with different styles. And so it was actually bizarre to me in Gambit that they were so limited. Now, I get part of that is that they were just exceptionally good on those maps and they were playing to those strengths. And that was earlier in the lineup when he hadn't had it for as long, hadn't played as many tournaments. Now he's had a chance to really develop this team on many maps. So here's a stat that might shock you. Of the 7 maps, there's only 1 map in the last 3 months offline that Gambit has a losing record on. And that is actually Overpass, believe it or not, because they've only played it once offline in the last 3 months. And that was where CLG beat them in epic fashion. And CLG obviously kind of really did their homework on that one. So I would still consider Overpass a pretty good map for them, just no one plays them on it. Every other map they have a winning record on. So believe it or not, in terms of when you look on LAN, they have a real toss-up as to what their best map is, because they have 3 maps that are all really strong. They have Inferno, which actually they've really emerged as a strong team on. They've been able to beat like SK Gaming, Mouse Sports, Immortals. Interestingly enough, they've lost to this Fnatic though at DreamHack Summer. They've got Train. Now, Train was a map that was in the middle of their map pool before when they just had the Cobble and Overpass, and it was a map that often let them down. They've now become complete bangers on it. That is a map that they have the most wins on. It's a map that they've played the most. And they've beaten tons of teams on this one. Yeah, they've lost to SK, but who's a very good Train team. They've beaten the likes of G2, who early on were emphasizing that map. They've beaten Immortals, who likes that map to some degree. They've beaten Cloud9, who definitely like that map. Yeah, they've lost to Fnatic. Again, that was some factor of Fnatic's play rather than Fnatic being good on that map. They've also beaten Virtus.pro, classic Train team. I'd argue the best team of all time on that, in terms of the Virtus.pro lineup, on that version of the map. The other map, as you may be unsurprised to hear, is obviously Cobblestone. But they haven't played it that much because teams don't tend to want to play them on it. So they've played teams who like to play Cobblestone. So they've played, for example, SK, but they lost to SK because SK was pretty godlike. They've beaten G2 on the map, and I actually think G2 could be the best team in the world on Cobblestone. So very impressive. They're coming in with a running record on that. Then when you go to the other maps in the map pool, even though I said they had the winning map rate, and even, for example, the one that they don't have a winning record on, Overpass, I think still a good map. One of them doesn't really count. Like, they typically have banned out a lot and don't want to play Mirage. Yeah, they've won it once, but it was against Optic. Who cares? The other two maps, though, you might be surprised at this, because Nuke, classically, is one that when Zeus was in Na'Vi, they never liked to play this map. It was always a second rotation ban if they could. They didn't like to play it. But this team has been able to beat Team Liquid, who likes the map. They've been able to beat Hellraisers. They've lost to G2, but in overtime, and I think G2 is the best Nuke team in the world. So you can see they can really get cooking on Nuke. So actually, that's kind of a surprise one we want to see later in pools. It's not going to happen in this match, but if they go later in the tournament, keep your eye out for that one. And then the most surprising of all has got to be Cash, because Cash was the Zeus Na'Vi permaban for a long time. That was a map they really always avoided, especially at the height of their powers. And yet this is a map where they have a winning record in it, and they've played it 5 times in the last 3 months. Their losses to it, the only 2 losses they've had in those last 3 months, were both to SK Gaming. Now, admittedly, SK Gaming's a team that have traditionally not liked Cash, but SK Gaming right now is very good on Cash. That actually, when they emerged again with Phelps in the lineup and Fur being a complete banger, that was a map they were wrecking people on. So losing to SK, no shame in that, probably the best Cash team in the world. Then they've beaten teams like Cloud9, we know play that. G2, definitely like to play it. They've really gotten some wins in there. So when you look at all these maps, believe it or not, in terms of the map pool, Gambit is going to have the advantage in this series. Now, if we go across and we look at the Fnatic map pool, they are actually quite limited. Like, they only have basically 2 maps that they're really good on, which is Mirage and Overpass. Now, Mirage, which was always in the middle of the old map pool for the old Fnatic teams, is been very good. This is a map where they've beaten tons of good teams on Mirage. They've beaten Cloud9, a very underrated team on Mirage. Immortals, always loved Mirage. Na'Vi, obviously a team that loves Mirage at the moment. Flipside, a team that classically has played Mirage for pretty much all of Blade's career in CSGO. Their losses on the map? Okay, yeah, they've lost to SK Gaming. Probably the best Mirage team in the world overall, twice. That's 2 of their losses. This is a team that's really strong on Mirage, so if they can get it there, that's a great map for them. Problem is, you know that as far as Gambit goes, that's a map that sometimes they ban, so you might not get your chances there because it's going to line up. Now, the other map they're pretty good on, this is a real surprise. Even Fnatic didn't expect this, and it wasn't a map they were necessarily picking, but it's Overpass, believe it or not. It's a map that the old classic Fnatic lineups, and this lineup when it existed last year was very good. Never was that good on. They only won on it out of skill. But now they've really got a feel for how to play that CT side, and those aggressive moves they make, even though it's a very coordinated map, somehow they're making it work, and they're making it work against some of the best and most tactical teams in the world. So they've managed to get wins on this map against the likes of Immortals, team I've always loved Overpass. SK Gaming, a team that classically, with the old lineup, used to be one of the best, I think is a bit weak now, so that one's not as crazy as it sounds. They've beaten G2, a team that at the moment is one of the best Overpass teams, top 3, top 4 Overpass team in the world. They've lost to G2 as well, but again, fair play. And then they've lost to FaZe, and FaZe have always liked Overpass. It's a map that they've really worked back in again, and a lot of people were afraid to play FaZe on Overpass. In fact, FaZe smashed the shit out of SK at ECS in the final on Overpass. So really impressive on Overpass. Then once you get past that, it starts to get ropey. Like, I know a lot of people were high on their Inferno. Their Inferno isn't that great to me. I mean, they've lost the last 3 on it. I feel like that's a real up and down map for them because of the fact that you have to be consistent on both sides. And Fnatic isn't a very consistent team. They are quite streaky because they play off the individual skill. And as a result, they don't have the most of the T sides as much as some of the other teams do because they don't have the rhythm to do it. I think of them more as an aggressive playmaking CT side team at the moment. Train has been one where somehow they're getting wins on it, so fair play, in fact, including over Gambit. But when you look at them play on Train, they still aren't a team that's really figured that map out. I know they've been picking it sometimes and going to that map, but this is a map for me where they still don't seem to really understand it because they don't have a solid CT defense. It's a tough map. If you want to try the kind of gamble defense that they like on an Inferno, you've really got to have your T side down with the flashes and smokes, and they don't have that god tier Olaf who can go to the Olaf position and just take over the map and queue all your actions like they used to in the Pronax days. So that's a map to me that kind of shows how good the fragging is in Fnatic, that they can still get wins on that map when I don't consider it a good map for them. Now, Nuke has been a map, traditionally was their permaban. They never played it, but they've played it a couple of times now. They played Cloud9 earlier in the year and beat them, but that was when Cloud9 was kind of slumping. And they lost a very narrow game to Astralis, who I think is a very good Nuke team, in this Swiss system of this tournament. So we know they can play Nuke. The problem is, are they going to get a chance to play it? And actually, Gambit has been surprisingly decent on it. Then you've got to consider, here's an interesting factor. This Fnatic lineup last year used to love Cash. Cash and Cobble were their 2 best maps. Those are the maps they don't play now, as crazy as it sounds. So Cash, they have played a bit. They've lost to SK, they've lost to Virtus Pro. SK, very good Cash team. Virtus Pro, not very good Cash team. That's not a good record to have. It's no surprise they don't go to that map, and it is that in there with their second bans often. Cobble is actually at the moment their permaban. They haven't played it offline the last 3 months. It's just a map that's gone away from them in terms of how they play it. They don't like to play it whatsoever. And obviously, classically, with it being one of Gambit's strongest doing their entire lineup with this Gambit lineup, you'd think Fnatic's going to stay away from it. So, in terms of the map pool, I give the overall strength over all the maps in terms of knowing how to play the maps big time to Gambit. Now, that doesn't mean that Gambit's going to win the series off that, because part of how Fnatic gets wins on maps like Overpass, Inferno, Train is due to the fragging level and the playmaking of their players. So now it comes down to the ban, the second ban, the decider, the picks, because we're going to know what maps we're going to play in the series. So as I said, with Gambit having the map pool advantage, and quite a big one in my opinion, the problem for Fnatic is how do you get to a series where Gambit doesn't have the chance to 2-0 you, where they have a map on theirs that they're pretty likely to win, and then you get to your map and they also have a chance to win. And so to even get to a third is going to be tough. And that's the problem. I don't think Fnatic can do it unless they're going to go with a really crazy pick ban approach, which I don't think they should do, because I think they're a team that plays off confidence and thinking that they can win on their own maps and the opponents, even if they're not good. I think they're going to go with a fairly default map veto. So the bans, I think, should be fairly obvious. Like, I think Gambit should pretty much ban Mirage because it's their most banned map in the last sort of like 3 months of tournaments. They ban basically either Mirage or Cash. They're the only two they ban. And since you already know that Fnatic doesn't want to play Cash, you don't have to ban that. So you can just go ahead and ban out Mirage, then add in, it is the best map by far for this Fnatic lineup, and that's an obvious ban. So immediately Fnatic can't play their best map in this series. Now, in terms of what Fnatic will ban, it's pretty obvious, right? Fnatic literally has not played Cobble in the last 3 months. So unless they want to do a crazy move, which I think we very ill advise, and bring it out with no one having seen it, and one of Gambit's best map, arguably the one that they've been the best on historically, I think you're just going to see the same normal permaban, which is you're going to see Cobble. So we've both essentially knocked out what in theory should be each other's best maps, and now we're going to go down the map pools. So in terms of what Gambit will pick, I think this is actually pretty clear. If you look at what Gambit has been picking, they have picked Train a whole gang of times, including the last 4 series that they played in. They have first picked Train. Other than that, they sometimes pick Inferno, they sometimes pick Cobble. Cobble's not going to be available, so are they going to pick Train? Are they going to pick Inferno? You shouldn't really pick Inferno based on the fact that, first of all, it's a map that Fnatic has beaten you on. Second, which, I mean, by the way, they've also lost on Train, but that's a different story. Also, in theory, it's more up there in the Fnatic map pool. Now, admittedly, because Fnatic's lost 3 times on it in the last 3 games they played on it, maybe that's a factor that Gambit thinks, well, we're really good on that map, and this is a map where we can kind of like force Fnatic to play a map they're uncomfortable on. I think if you look at how history goes, I think Gambit's going to go with history. They're going to go with comfort, knowing that they're in a big playoff and their team hasn't gone that far in the big majors, and they're just going to pick what they think's strong, which is Train, which is a very good map for them. It's a map they've won the most on in the last 3 months, and it's a map where you look at Fnatic, and I think they're only winning on it by virtue of skill. I think they have a very tenuous grasp on how to play the CT side of that map. So I think Gambit will pick Train, and I think that will favour Gambit. Now, Fnatic's pick, this is also why Gambit should pick Train, is because with no Mirage available, and Overpass, yes, not being something Gambit's played, but because people don't want to play Gambit on it, I think Fnatic logically themselves should pick Inferno. That's why I don't think Gambit should pick Inferno, because I think actually Fnatic will pick Inferno. There's no Mirage available. Gambit's second ban oftentimes actually will be Inferno. It's a map they often will ban second rotation, so if you don't pick it now on your Fnatic, you might not get it as the decider. They might not be willing to play you on it. Finally, you have to consider, though, that since I said Fnatic's lost the last 3 times they played Inferno, maybe they will gamble and go into Overpass, because admittedly Gambit hasn't played it much in the last 3 months, and Fnatic has been bizarrely good on it. Now, I have to say, I think if Fnatic pick Overpass, I think they're dead. I think that would be a 2-0 for Gambit, clearly, because as much as Fnatic has been good on Overpass, I think Gambit are a very good team on Overpass in terms of the routine of how to play the maps. Now, that doesn't change the fragging aspect, yes. Now, I will say one thing I found very interesting was, since JW's been so good in this tournament, Overpass is a map I've noticed where he gets a lot of really interesting sneaky flanks and pushes and just gets into weird positions and is able to create a lot of chaos against structured teams. Now, I'm not talking about G2 there, I'm talking in general about teams who have a proper T side. So I feel like that certainly is a factor where if he is gonna do those ballsy plays, even in a massive pressure match, that could be a wrinkle that could help a Fnatic. But in general, I think traditionally they should probably go with Inferno despite the losses and just say, if we don't go Inferno now, we could never get it as the decider. Now, funnily enough, I don't think it's going to matter because the second bans in the series, I think Gambit at that point in time will ban whichever of those Fnatic didn't pick. So Fnatic pick Inferno, I think Gambit will ban Overpass, knowing that Cash and Nuke are left and Fnatic doesn't like either really. And actually, traditionally, Fnatic would have to ban Cash, you would think. Now, if Fnatic picks Overpass, I think Gambit will ban Inferno here. Although that might be a different choice because in that scenario, you might think to yourself, well, maybe Gambit would instead ban Inferno or Overpass there, or ban Cash there and instead let it. But because of the fact that Gambit's been willing to play Nuke and they know that Fnatic doesn't like Cash at the moment, I feel like you want to try and make Fnatic have to pick one of their worst maps for the third map, so they can't ever really feel comfortable anywhere. And then you rely on tactics and know that they might break down. So I think Fnatic will ban Cash, and I think the decider will actually be Nuke. And I think that will be a very interesting decider. Like I said, it's a map where Fnatic looked all right. They certainly seemed like they could play it against Astralis, but I don't think they were that great. They had a pretty underwhelming T-side to me. Whereas you look at Gambit, I think they've been pretty good on that map. And I think it's been a surprise. It's been one that's a pocket pick for them. They don't actually pick it, but as in that they're willing to play. And I think that's an interesting one for them. So in terms of the map pool, Gambit gets the advantage. In terms of the maps that I think will be picked, Gambit gets the advantage. In fact, on the basis of these maps that are very likely going to come out, Gambit should 2-0. But regardless, I think they will 2-1 otherwise. Now, in terms of the star power, the skill matchup, right, I actually give Fnatic the slight skill advantage over Gambit, but I want to stress slight because yes, you look at Fnatic, those are some of the most storied, epic players of all time. Players who have been some of the best in the world at different points in time at their roles. But right now, they're not at that level. Meanwhile, for Gambit, what's funny is a lot of the Gambit players don't have the same star power, don't have the same value to their names, and a lot of them have never been the best players in the world, or at least not for the last 3 years. And yet, actually, they've got kind of a surprisingly better lineup skill-wise than people might realise. So let's start with Gambit. So in Gambit, far and away, the best player on their team is Adren. And the key thing is, in the last couple of tournaments where they haven't been as impressive, he had lower numbers. But that first sort of 4 to 5 months of the year, he was killing it. I'm talking like potential MVP of 2017 numbers. Amazing numbers in a lesser team. And he was doing it not just kills and damage. He had insane impact. He would do in clutches. He would always play his role very well. He'd be an entry at times. The guy really was doing it all and showing what a great mind he's got for the game. He's a very calm player when he plays. So here's the good news if you're a Gambit fan. Adren is back to that level, if not better. Like, he's actually on pace to be a potential MVP of this tournament. And in this game, he comes in as the best player on both teams right now. So actually, Gambit gets the best player in the server. Problem is, beyond that, it kind of evens out a bit because Hobbit has been pretty consistently good as a second star. He's been a solid other star player. He puts up good numbers. He's very consistent in his level of play. I don't think he's a superstar. Like, I don't think he takes over games in the same degree. I think he's just a consistent player that does his job and he's a good second star. The problem they get is once you get into the middle of their player field. Because Mo famously does really good against tier 2. That is still the case now. You put him against the lesser teams in a Swiss system, he's going to do really well. The problem is he historically doesn't show up late in big tournaments and doesn't show up late against the big teams. And so that's where I have my question marks. So if he turns up in the manner he can against tier 2, yes, they'll have a very good chance. It's when he doesn't turn up, as he traditionally hasn't, that I think they lose a lot of impact, especially because he's the AWPer and you're using a lot of the economy to get him set up and to get him his weapon. Now, Dosia, yes, he was like the MVP of DreamHack Austin when they won the tournament. That was a one-off blip that you haven't seen for like 2 or more years going back of that level. And you haven't seen it since then. So actually, Dosia has been very underwhelming at this point in time. And I don't expect him to have a big impact on the series. With that said, at least he's a veteran. At least he doesn't just crumble under pressure. He just plays okay. But the problem with Dosia is he's not a big fragger anymore. And that used to be one of his big qualities because he had that very set style of play, but he was also a pretty solid fragger. He's just an okay player now. He's an average pro. And finally, in terms of Zeus, Zeus is also just an average pro. I don't know why people try to big it up like he's doing loads of fragging. No, he's just average. Now, he's a very good in-game leader and you want him in the game. He's going to have a big impact in that sense. But you can see Gambit is relying a lot on Adren and then pretty much on Adren and Hobbit. They're hoping Mo comes or something, but it's got to be those two. Otherwise, if those two aren't there, they're not going to win this series. Now, you go to the Fnatic side, and the great thing for Fnatic is that in general, traditionally, when you look at the lames, they have a pretty even spread, right? We know when they were dominating late 2015, early 2016, that actually they were a team where they had incredible fragging output from across the board. This is a very different Fnatic in terms of who's doing well at the moment. Because first and foremost, the best player over the last few months and the best player this tournament right now for Fnatic is JW. And actually JW was one of the players in that lineup I was talking about before who was actually kind of struggling. He was the one who seemed a bit whack. And there were the rumours that he was going to go to NiP. And it seemed like he was all over the place and he really lost his ability to AWP and he had to go to all these stupid, like maining a shotgun and stuff like that. And it was a really kind of a gimmicky style of play, and he wasn't a good player at that point in time. He was like an average level pro, and he's someone before where we thought of him as like a very streaky but effective playmaker. At this point in time, JW is back to vintage JW. Like, people always want to say that after one game. I think he legitimately, if you look at the last few tournaments, is back. He is really proactive. He plays with the AWP. He's got confidence with it. He hits his shots. He plays like that disruptive playmaking element, and that he is a key dynamic for Fnatic right now and comes in as their best player again. Then, here's great news for them. Olofmeister is not back to his superstar form where he's one of the best players of all time, but he's back to being a star player. Like, he legitimately has been playing pretty well these last few months, and he is a good, solid second star in this team. And crucially, just like JW, he's gotten some of his playing style back, where he has the big impact kills and he playmakes, and crucially, you can see his confidence in that he hybrid AWPs again, and he picks that up when he wants to, and he's able to take over games at times with it. Now, he's not a superstar in the same way he was before, where you just knew he would dominate the game. It's a different era, it's a different lineup even of Fnatic, and obviously he's had the injury in the meantime, but certainly a good player, and he can certainly match up against everyone except the Dren at the moment on Gambit and give a good account for himself. Now, where it gets good for the guys from Fnatic is their third option, I think, is better than Gambit's third option, because Dennis is pretty good right now. He's still super effective on pistol rounds. He's one of the only players in the team who I don't think really died in terms of skill. At best, he went down a bit, but then his team was doing much worse. I think in general, he's still a pretty skilled player. He's still a player who seems to always play with the same confidence and the same mentality. And I think that's a key, that their trio is pretty good in this team. And I think gradually is, well, slightly rather, is better than the Gambit trio. Now, believe it or not, flusha and Crims, two classic role players who have played incredible performances at majors from those positions, and they are playing fairly shit right now for their level. If you know their careers, they're in the worst slumps of their career. flusha hasn't had more than 0.65 frags per round average at a tournament since the last major. He has been really underwhelming. Now, yes, because he's flusha, he still wins some clutches, he still puts up some crazy kills, but he doesn't have any kind of consistent performance within this team. He's actually very underwhelming in terms of fragging. He's not the flusha, for example, that when Olofmeister went out last year, was just straight carrying a team that had no business ever being in like semi-finals of big tournaments, but was still getting there. Crims, this is the most depressing of all, because I still consider him one of the most fundamentally sound players of all time, with the likes of Xyp9x. By the way, a Dread would certainly be one you'd have to put up there. Crims right now is whack. Like, here's the thing. It's a bit like Shox in G2. He still wins clutches, so you still see rounds where you're like, wow, he still got it. The fragging is non-existent from Crims right now, and it's really, really worrying and really, really disturbing, because even though the fragging in general, it's not bad in Fnatic, in general, if like your worst players are flusha on Crims, you're going to be a pretty good fragging team. It's just nowhere near the level, because the key for me with Crims in all those past lineups is because he was a consistent player and played fundamentally sound. His style of play allowed JW to be such a wild card, allowed flusha to make these crazy plays, allowed Olof to just dominate, one kill every round, etc. And then he would be the aspect that was the solid rock. He would be the anchor from which they could build everything. At the moment, he's a liability along with flusha at times. So I give the slight skill edge to Fnatic, but it is slight, as much as history might tell you otherwise. Now, in terms of, style of play, that's the interesting one, because Gambit does have the structure. Gambit does have the grinding style, which is the classic Zeus time style. They still have the ability to run the clock down and execute onto the site at the last minute when you know they're going on the site, but you don't know when they're going on it. The real question comes in this sense. I feel like this is an example of where style is going to tie into the intangibles of experience and who's been here before, because if Gambit can run their style and execute their strategies, then they have a good chance to win this series. Then they are the favourite to win the series, because they've got the maps on the side, they're only a slight skill disadvantage, they've got consistent players, and they've got the style to win the series. The problem is, can they execute when it gets down to 30, gets down to 40 seconds, they're going onto a site, everyone knows they're going onto a site, they're going on at that time, and it's all about execution, knowing that Fnatic is a team that are going to be aggressive, that are going to take weird setups, that are going to flash themselves out, that are going to have a player like JW or Flusher just get into a weird position and just stay there and let you go past them and creep in behind you and cause havoc and make weird pushes. That's something that could throw off a team like that in terms of Gambit if they're not a team that plays at the world-class level very often, if they cannot handle their nerve. So that's the real question for me. That's the part where I get worried that Fnatic wins the series, because I feel like enough of those plays can psychologically wreck younger and more inexperienced players like Hobbit, like Mo. I think someone like Adren can be amazing, but even then, Adren hasn't been that deep in majors for a long time. So he's a player where you look at him and you say, is he going to be as incredible when he gets to this quarterfinals? And if he is, there's so much fragging on the other side. If his help doesn't turn up, can he do it? So here's the thing. Analysis, the cold, rational side of my brain says Gambit will win this series either 2-0 or 2-1. I'm fairly certain it's going to happen. I don't think it's like a matchup where they're an overwhelming favourite. Like, I would weigh up every factor, and obviously Fnatic players have been there much more often and have done a lot more things later in tournaments and always have the chutzpah, or whatever you call it, to kind of go the big balls to make the plays and to get deep and to outlast people, which they did last major. But I think this is the time Gambit gets past them. So I give Fnatic Gambit the edge. I will say, in terms of intuition, it's not that I think Fnatic will win, but I am a little bit nervous for Gambit, who, despite having so many factors going in their favour, I need to see that they're not going to just crumble from the Fnatic players, because I feel like Fnatic are not a team that's going to go down easy. They're really going to make plays, and they're really going to make this a dirty game where Gambit has to execute to win. So I think Gambit will win the series 2-0 or 2-1, but I think probably 2-0. Now, the real match we all want to talk about is obviously what would have been the final in Thorin's world, SK Gaming versus Astralis. Crucially, we've only seen these two teams match up with these exact lineups in a best of three once, and it was at ECS, the last tournament Astralis played at, and it was an amazing 2-1 series. Oh, by the way, just for the Gambit Fnatic one, last time Gambit and Fnatic played at DreamHack Summer, Fnatic did win that, but Gambit was pretty poor, Adren wasn't at usual form, and Fnatic was kind of unexpected in terms of the map strength they had. Gambit will come in prepared from this time. Now, in this matchup, the last time they played, you had SK Gaming winning, but in an incredibly narrow fashion. Like, actually, the team that won the map by the most was Astralis. They won Overpass pretty convincingly. They narrowly lost Mirage in an amazing game. And the decider was Inferno, and it was also an amazing game. It was really back and forwards. Both teams had issues holding on CT side, and in the end, SK came through with the big plays, and especially the play of Fur got them through that series. Interestingly enough, Device was a monster in that series. No one really had any fanfare about him, but he actually outplayed everyone in the series and had a really great series. Fortunately, his team didn't win the series. So actually, it's probably the most hyped matchup you can get in the game. Like, if anything, if you want to pick a team that could beat SK, Astralis is it. And when I went through all the factors, actually, this is one of the closest matchups when you look at all the factors I think you could possibly get in Counter-Strike ever, but especially right now. So don't think it's a foregone conclusion that SK wins and wins this major. Now, in terms of the map pool, we'll start with SK. They are the best team in the world. In fact, I actually think already, from what I've seen from them with Phelps in the lineup, I think this lineup is already one of the best of all time. Sure, they haven't won the two majors like the other one did, so it's tough when you're weighing up the accomplishments to say, are they better than the lineup last year? But in terms of just watching them play in the server, I preferred the style of the old SK last year's with FNX. I thought that style was beautiful to watch. It had a lot of intelligence. It had a kind of a cerebral component to it that made sense. And I thought as a result, it was very consistent because that's what cerebral styles do. But I actually think that this SK lineup is better, and I think they're going to go on to prove to be better. That doesn't mean they'll win the majors. That might be the thing that costs them, but I think they certainly have a very good chance to win this major and the next major, and thus go down as a better version of SK, and actually go down. They have the chance to go down as one of the best teams of all time. Now, with this SK Gaming, they at the moment have been the most active team in the scene over the last 3 months. They've played something ridiculous, like 8 tournaments in the last 3 months, and this will be like their 8th or 9th. They have a ridiculous map pool right now. Even though there are a few maps I actually think have some weaknesses to them, they even get wins on their weakening maps. And so not only have they played all these maps tons, like of the 7 maps, they've never played Nuke in 3 months, but the other 6 maps, they have played, the one that they've played the least, they've played 7 times, and the one they've played the most, they've played 13 times in 3 months. So they have an insane amount of ground covered on all these maps, and they really have their rhythm down. of the 6 maps that they've been playing, they have a winning record on every single map. Now, yes, when you get down to Overpass, that's only a winning record by 1 map. But every other map, it's by a few. So you start at the top, the exceptional maps for them. Now, funnily enough, it has been the 2 maps that have been exceptional, the ones that they've recreated, are the ones that I talked about in a video a while back when I saw that they'd recreated the team and I saw that they could be a potential major champion, which was Cash and Mirage. No one at the time was the best in the world on Cash, and SK's really emerged as fantastic on that. And even though they've had some key losses on it, those were to teams like G2. Like, I count the Space Soldiers one as a fluke at Cologne. So they've lost to G2, fine. Who really gives a shit about that? That's a team who is pretty good on Cash. That's a team who just stylistically seems to have SK's number. I think SK are fantastic on Crash, and if they get the chance to play it against teams, they should be. Then you've got to consider Mirage. Now, the key thing about Mirage is almost all the top teams play Mirage. And in theory, no one else is the best on Mirage. It's such a tough map to win. It's so variable on both sides. You're never safe, no matter how many you get on one side or the other. And actually, SK's got an insane record on it. They've won 10 out of the last 12 that they've played on it. Who have they lost? CLG in epic fashion. Optic Gaming in just bizarre fashion that no one really understands. Aside from that, they're smashing everyone. They're beating Cloud9, classic Mirage team. Immortals, love Mirage. They're beating FNATIC, like Mirage right now, one of their best maps. They're beating Astralis, definitely know how to play Mirage. They're beating Virtus.pro, one of the original Mirage teams. They're beating FNATIC again. So this is a team that really knows how to play this map. So those 2 maps are exceptional out of this world. But they're so good right now that they have maps where they have insane win rates on them that I don't even think they're the best team on. So for example, they are a very good team on Cobble, and they've won 8 of their last 9. Or was it 8 out of 2? Was it 7 out of the last 9? I think it might have been 7 out of the last 9, I'm not sure. But they've beaten many good teams, including like Gambit, North, Cloud9. These are teams that like to play Cobblestone. With that said, I think it's a pretty good map for them. I certainly think they're a top 3, top 4 team on Cobble. I don't think they're the best on it, though. I think that just shows what an exceptional team they are, that they can even win with their insane firepower on that map and look like they're the best team on it. Another map that I don't think they're the best on, I think they're pretty good on, but I think their record kind of belies the fact that they have insane fragging power now and they can do a Fnatic and just win even when they're not necessarily the best on them, is Train. They've won 7 of their last 8. The loss came to Cloud9, and that was 8 games ago. Since then, they have won 7 games in a row on Train, but they have a very different style to the Train they had with the old FNX lineup, where it was their best map, and they won the 17 in a row. They're very good on it right now, but yes, they've beaten FaZe on it like 3 times. Pretty impressive, because I think FaZe, as bizarre as it sounds, on paper, I still think, if you put them in just any random match, I still think FaZe is actually the best Train team. But admittedly, SK's beat them 3 times on it. They've also beaten like Cloud9. They've beaten Gambit, who's become pretty good on that map. So I actually think that Train is one where it's good. At the moment, I know a lot of teams want to play Train, but I still think it's variable sometimes. The fact that they've beaten the best team in the world on it's pretty good. But I think if you had both teams play other teams 15 times, I'd still edge FaZe to take it myself. I think there's some problems in that skill gets them by a lot on this map. Then you've got to go to Inferno. Now, a lot of people have seen some big wins for SK on Inferno because their most played map. They've played it 14 times. Actually, I said before someone had played 13 times. They played one map 14 times. It's Inferno. Now, on this map, they have won tons and tons of times, but they've also had some very memorable, crucial losses. Like, they've had losses to the likes of Gambit, FaZe, Envious, famously at EPL, G2, obviously, a matchup we remember them losing, Big, most recently, which would have allowed them to go 3-0 and get out of the group, and funnily enough, get on the other side of the bracket, would have turned out. So they've had some key losses that are in the back of their mind. Now, part of that I don't blame them for. I think it's very tough to be the best team in the world on Inferno. I think if you don't want to be ideally, you actually want Inferno to be further down your map pool because no one's really the best. And it is a map that no one's really figured out the CT side because you need really good setups. You need to adapt them every single matchup pretty much. And then finally, you need to have full utility as often as you can. If your money keeps getting broken by weird force buys, you're going to have a nightmare time getting those CT rounds. So I think that actually Inferno's in the right place in the map pool, but I think it is actually a potential vulnerability in as much as they can lose on it. Doesn't mean anyone else is so strong they're definitely going to win on though. Then you've got Overpass, and for me, yes, they used to be a Train and Overpass team with FNX. Now they are not. Those are 2 teams that I wouldn't even have top 3 for them, and particularly Overpass, I think is their weakest map beyond Nuke, which they don't play, and history bears it out. They've lost to G2, they've lost to FNATIC, they've lost to Astralis. Okay, G2 and Astralis, pretty good Overpass teams. Astralis the best Overpass team. But I think in general, despite the fact they've managed to beat FaZe on this map as well, I think FaZe is a good team on it. They've beaten Immortals. I still feel like their overpass has weaknesses, and I don't think they've adapted to it as well, and I don't think Fallen's as good on it classically as he was last year when he was a superstar top 5 player in the world. So in terms of the map pool, SK has the best map pool in the world. They have the best map pool of any team in this tournament, and no one can fuck with their stats. But that's stats. Now, if FaZe was still here, in theory, in terms of how to play the maps, I'd say FaZe maybe has the best map pool in the world. I think Astralis has a very good map pool. They don't have the stats to back it up, and they don't have the activity recently, though. So in terms of map pool, let's talk about the Astralis map pool. So classically, we know the best overpass, the best Astralis map, I've given it away, is Overpass, right? It still is. It's an incredible map for them. They lost once on it in the last 3 months, and that was to Team Liquid in what I consider a fluke game in the ECS group stage, because that was the one where they said afterwards that something had gone wrong with the air conditioning inside their booth, and it was like 35 degrees Celsius. So it's understandable why they might lose that when they were a map up already, and I don't think that counts as much. They've won their last few, including against SK Gaming, like I said, at ECS. Now, beyond that, they don't have a great record at the moment on Mirage, but it's still a map they're very good on. And you look at their losses on that map. Okay, first of all, they've beaten Virtus Pro, a classic Mirage team who's always been good on it. They lost to Cloud9 in overtime, and Cloud9 that was one of the first games where Cloud9 exhibited this incredible T-side that they've had at the moment, and that new style where you've got a slower style to T-side and play off individual play. And the last match was actually the second map of ECS, which was the 16-14 win by SK, which I thought actually Astralis played a very good game there. So that's an example of a map where you've only won 1 out of your last 3 in the last 3 months, but I actually think you're a pretty good team on it, and it should be up there in terms of maps, even though the win rate isn't that great. Now, Inferno's been a pretty good map for Astralis. They've been one of the teams that really have put their name forward as one of the best on the map. Sure, they've lost to SK 3 times on the map. That's big, yes. And if they play them on it here, sure, traditionally you'd think that's going to be tough for them. But they've beaten G2 on this map, who was pretty good at a point in time. They've beaten Team Liquid a couple of times, which admittedly isn't the craziest shit ever. It's just all right. But I think it's just, if you look at the style, again, this isn't about win rates. If you look at the style of how Astralis plays Inferno, they're a team that's equipped to play both sides of the map. Now, once you get past that, you get down to Train. And Train, when Astralis first came around, was their best map. In fact, they snapped SK Gaming, the old lineup streak of 17 wins on it, to win E-League Season 2. And in doing so, that was the last game that actually that SK Gaming lineup ever played. They kind of killed the team to some degree. And they went on to win the major on that very map, Train. And that was the map that really got them there. And they were fantastic on it. Now, they haven't played it very much over the last few months. Part of that is because most teams don't play it. And a lot of teams are avoiding it against Astralis. Because even though they don't play it much, a lot of teams still feel like they're a dangerous team on it. And like they're right up there with the FaZes and the SKs of the world. And I think in terms of style, you can't fuck with how much SK's won on it. SK's got an incredible record. I think it's like 10-2 or something. But Astralis has a very good style on it and still a very good understanding of the map. They lost on it to FaZe. Fair enough. FaZe is fantastic on that map. They beat Team Liquid. Okay, not a great opponent, but I think they just haven't played it that much. And the reason they haven't played it is because people would rather gamble and play them on an Inferno or Mirage than let them go to Train. Now, Cash is a map where we know they can play it. They played it at the last major in the semi-finals against FNATIC and won on it. Did they actually win on it? No, I think they lost that one in overtime, didn't they? Did they? Did they not? Did FNATIC win a map in overtime? No, I think they got 2-0. I think they did win it in overtime. But they certainly have the rhythm to play it. They just haven't played it in the last 3 months. Now, that's interesting, obviously, because we know going against SK is loving Cash and have had a really good record on it. So that's a potential weakness to look into if SK is going to pick right into it, which they didn't at ECS. Now, Cobblestone is the map where traditionally Astralis doesn't play it with this lineup. They've only played it something like 3 times ever on LAN, this lineup. Twice they played it against FaZe in the last 3 months, and that was purely because of mind games with FaZe. So they beat FaZe when it was in the group state or Swiss system of IM Sydney, and then they lost to FaZe in the actual semi-finals, and it was claimed it was a bait where once they were losing, they didn't use their T-side strats. So you wouldn't expect to see them play Cobble here. We know SK is a good Cobble team, so that's where it gets interesting, okay? Because we know that Astralis is doing pretty well on Inferno. We know that they heavily win on Overpass. We know that they're better than their record on Mirage. Train and Nuke, you offset them when you take out the losses to a FaZe. They've basically got 5 good maps, depending on if they're playing elite opposition, and that's the key when we come to the matchup. So when we match these 2 teams up, we go with the bans. So SK's ban should still be their permaban. It should be Nuke. It's the map that they haven't played over the last 3 months. It's a map where we know that Astralis can be pretty good on it. We know that Astralis knows how to play it. you don't really want to risk it against Astralis. So I think you will just see SK, as they have in all 12 occasions over the last 3 months, they will ban nuke, because they ban it against every type of team and in every type of tournament. So it will be a nuke ban for SK, and for Astralis, I think this is a pretty obvious one as well. Just as they have on all occasions except that bizarre phase semi-final at IEM Sydney, I think that Astralis will go with their classic ban of Cobble because SK is so strong on it. So we'll have 2 obvious permabans, and now we come into pick territory. Now, if we assume SK picks first again, it doesn't really matter for this one, by the way. I think that SK, there's 2 maps they will pick. It will be Mirage or it will be Cache. And this entirely depends on the logic and the psychology of where SK's at as a team. Because traditionally, if they pick Mirage, I wouldn't dispute it. I would say, yes, you're an incredible team on Mirage right now, and you've gotten wins over Astralis already on this map, and it's one where you probably are the best Mirage team in the world. Those are all good reasons to pick it, especially when you've got an insane firepower team like they do that's very consistent. But I think there's a very strong case for them to pick Cache here, because that last Mirage they played at ECS was way too close for comfort. I think Astralis is a much better team on Mirage than Cache, and so if I'm SK, I pick Cache here. This is one where I think you would have a very good chance to get the win. Astralis has a style of play on that map, but they don't have anywhere close to the level of variety and switch-ups that they have. Their players aren't as good on it. Device can't really utilize his AWP to the same way he can on Mirage. I feel like this is a really obvious map where you can negate some of the Astralis strengths if you go with Cache. But I actually think if you look traditionally at what SK has been picking, SK has picked Mirage 6 of the last 12 times. They've only picked Cache 3 of the last 12. And 3 of the last 5 times SK has picked Mirage. So I think actually they will just pick Mirage and they'll go, we'll go with our strength and we think we're better than you on it. So I think they will pick Mirage actually, even though I would personally pick Cache. Now Astralis' pick is obvious. They should pick Overpass. It is a map that they have picked 3 out of the last 4 times, basically everyone except FaZe, including picking it against SK, including winning it against SK. It's also one of the maps, as I've told you, I think is a bit ropey for SK. It's an obvious pick for Astralis and one that will favour them. So interestingly enough, the first 2 maps, if they are Mirage and Overpass, it will be like ECS. Astralis has a chance to 2-0. Now, I don't think they will. I think they'll win Overpass, and I think they have a chance on Mirage, but I would still say SK is better. But they will amazingly have a chance to 2-0 this series. If SK picks Cache, then I think it will be a clear 1-1. And in fact, of the 2, I don't think either really has that good a chance to win on their opponent's map. So I think it will be a 1-1 and we'll go to the decider. So what will the second ban be? Because that will decide what we get as the third map. SK's ban at ECS was Train. Because as I told you, despite how good they are and their great record, they don't really want to play Astralis on that map. And people kind of feel in the scene like Astralis is better than their record shows. So I think it will be the same again. I think logically, when you consider there's Train, Cache, and Inferno left, assuming that they didn't ban Cache and Mirage isn't available, I still think either way, whether it's Inferno or Mirage, there's no way SK is banning one of those. I don't think they're going to ban Cache, so I think it's obvious SK is going to ban Train here. I think they will do it. I think it's the right ban, by the way. I think that will be a very suspect third map for them. And I think Astralis, at this point in time, if we're in a world where Mirage or Cache is available, which should be the last map left, they will ban, I think, they will ban whichever of those 2 is available. Now, it would be interesting because maybe they would go with Mirage as a decider. I don't know, though, because I feel like you've got a better chance against SK and Inferno. So I think, anyway, that it'll be between Cache and Inferno at this point in time. And I think it's an obvious ban for Astralis to ban Cache if SK hasn't picked it. They did that at ECS as well. So I think, actually, we will end up with the same 3 maps at ECS. We will end up with the decider being Inferno. Now, interestingly enough, Inferno is the map both of these teams have lost the most times on. Interesting detail, right? So they're both good on it, but they've also both lost many times on it. Secondly, interesting detail, SK has beaten Astralis 3 times on this map. Even if it was in close fashion at certain times, they still have a very good win rate on it. So that tells me, personally, that the most likely outcome for this series is actually SK winning 2-1, which is that SK wins their map, Mirage or Cache, Astralis wins Overpass, the decider is Inferno, and SK wins in close fashion. That would be my assumption. I think that's the most likely outcome. I think the second most likely outcome is Astralis win 2-0. Wait a minute, let me think. Does that make sense? Yes. I think the second most likely outcome is Astralis win 2-0, which is Astralis wins Overpass, and then SK picks Mirage and Astralis wins Mirage. I think the third most likely outcome is Astralis wins 2-1, which is Astralis wins Overpass, they lose Mirage, but they win a narrow Inferno game. Now, despite there being 2 of the 3 scenarios where Astralis wins, I think SK will actually win this series 2-1. Let's look, and that's in terms of the maps, by the way, there. Now let's go and look. So in terms of map pool strength, goes to SK. In terms of the maps that are going to come out, goes to SK. Very narrowly, though. In terms of style, in terms of win rate, goes massively to SK. Now, in terms of skill, this is where it gets interesting. Because the last time they played at ECS, Device carried the series, but they lost. Phelps and Fur were both very good. Fur particularly was incredible, and his TSAT really activated a lot of what allowed them to win, for example, on Mirage and Inferno. coldzera underperformed, really underperformed, and yet SK won. Now that's interesting, because you might say to yourself, well, that's it right there. Now you know SK is going to win, right? Because coldzera is so consistent and so good. He doesn't underperform very often, so that's not going to happen again. Therefore, they'll win the series. Well, first of all, you can't always assume that Phelps is going to be as good as he was against Astralis. He's usually the 3rd star in the team. So that evens itself out. Secondly, go back and look at all the times SK lineups have played against Astralis in series. Now, admittedly, a bunch of them were with the old lineup of SK, but actually traditionally, coldzera, whose role hasn't changed in the team, has actually traditionally somewhat struggled and been underwhelming against Astralis. It's an interesting detail. Go back and look. Whereas actually Device has been pretty good against SK. So actually, I think a lot of these factors will hold. I think we'll get a very similar series. Now, an interesting detail is the last time they played, Xyp9x and Glaive fucking sucked in that series. They had really big problems. Glaive had some impact kills, but Xyp9x wasn't the classic Xyp9x. He wasn't able to win a lot of his clutches. He was put in bad situations often. He did really badly in terms of fragging, and him and Glaive just really sucked it up in terms of fragging. Now then, coming to the lineups of these two teams, here's what's interesting. Look on the SK side of things. coldzera for the tournament is playing fucking sick. I think he's the best player in the world, and I think he's playing like the best player in the world. So he comes into this matchup playing insanely well, but that's what he's done all the other times, and he hasn't performed as well. So certainly, if he turns up anywhere close to where he's been at recently and where he is against everyone else, yes, that will give SK the edge to win the series. But traditionally, interestingly enough, coldzera hasn't been that good against Astralis. And I think that's partly because of Astralis' style, which is kind of like coldzera's style. It's very controlled, it's disciplined, it's played of reads and information, it's based on playing the numbers. And so traditionally, that sort of a style, just like with MTW in the past in 2008 and 2009, when you look at the classic lineup they had, which was Zonic's team, by the way, they were a team, because they had good skill distribution and good at their roles and great tactics and anti-strats, they were also able to not shut down superstars, but neutralize them to some degree and control them, contain them to some degree. And I think they've been able to do that against superstars in CSGO. So, beyond coldzera, Fur has been the key to their victories. And I think that Fur has been pretty sick recently and is still sick now, but admittedly the last few tournaments haven't been quite that godlike level from earlier this year. But part of that's because of his style of play. It's harder to maintain god tier numbers if you're Fur, because that style of play is so risky and involves so much danger to yourself personally that even if you do well, the kill might not go to you, it might go on to someone else. So he's definitely been doing his job still. He's still an MVP candidate for his team. Phelps is a really good 3rd best player. If you only have to have him be your 3rd best player, first of all, he have games where he's the 1st or 2nd best star. And then secondly, he has been really consistent and he has been really good at fragging recently, especially in this tournament. Fallen has been underwhelming in terms of numbers. Like the last 2 or 3 tournaments, I haven't thought he was that good. He does win big rounds though. He does still do his job to some degree as an AWPer. I don't think he's a dominant AWPer in terms of the pure AWPing of sitting in a spot and kill people from that spot. He kills people with the AWP to win clutch rounds, sure. But overall, fairly underwhelming numbers, especially compared to the Fallen of last year. But it's a different lineup of SK. They don't play around Fallen like they did last year. They've got the other 3 stars. And Taco is someone where, yes, in terms of fragging, he has really low fragging numbers. Like, he is the worst fragger in this series. It's clear. But he does his job really well. And he's someone who enables coldzera, and that is a key element. He plays a support role, which is even more strained in this SK, because they have less support. They don't have an FNX there, so there's even more strain on him and Fallen. And then you've got to consider he has to also help coldzera be a beast that coldzera is. So, look over on the Astralis side of things, and this is where it gets interesting when we're going to match up in terms of skill. Because in terms of skill, here's the thing. There's 2 ways to look at it. Star Trio, yes. SK has it with coldzera, Fur, and Phelps, because they have all the playing styles covered, and they have a mad amount of skill there, and pretty good consistent skill. In terms of overall team, though, I actually think it's very even, because the good thing about Astralis is it's pretty even across the team. So, with that said, most of the Astralis players actually are not in the best form that they've been in Astralis. So, okay, Device is still a very good player. He's still a top 5, top 10 player in the world. He's not a superstar, though. He's not the best player in the world. Like, he borders between superstar and star at the moment. It depends on the game, depends on the opponent. And he has been a bit underwhelming this tournament. We've had a lot more deaths than you expect from Device, who normally plays himself a very calculated game, a very clean and efficient game. Interestingly, though, dupreeh over these last few tournaments has really been improving his fragging. He's hitting star level numbers. He's almost like the dupreeh of 2014 when him and Device were the clear stars of that Dignitas lineup. He has been the best player in Astralis at the tournament so far. He's having really good numbers, and if they go on to win the tournament, he will be an MVP candidate. Kirby is someone who's had good fragging, good at this tournament, plays his role well, obviously has an entry role, and gets crucial impact kills, and that continues, which is a good sign for the Astralis guys. Zipnix has had lower fragging pretty much each event as we've come into this one. His overall fragging isn't that good. This has been his worst tourney of the year so far. He's not in great form. He's obviously still going to play a smart game, a fundamental game. He can still win you clutches, but that is a bit disappointing, because if he was more clutch, as he traditionally is, that would help offset some of the SK side of things, because that's something people don't always understand. Players like, classically, MBK, 2012, 2013, 2014, Zipnix in 2015, yeah, their teams might choke and their teams might break down the big moments, but that doesn't mean they do. They're actually very clutch players, and they're providing some element to their team. It's other people breaking them down. So Zipnix's form is a worry if you think Astralis is going to win the series. Finally, Glaive. His fragging is decent, but it's not good. With that said, he's a very good in-game leader, and he's a proactive in-game leader who helps with some of the aggression, and obviously they're a team, when you look at them, who kind of lacks aggression. It's basically, it comes from Glaive and Kirby, that's it, and they work as that entry duo, and I think that they actually are able to initiate and get the rest of them going and open up space for people like Device to roll through with the AWP, for dupreeh to come in late and clutch with his now pretty good lurk, actually. So in terms of skill, I think it's pretty even. It's real tough to decide between the two. Yes, the star power goes to SK, but for the entire 5 versus 5, I think actually it's basically as close to 50-50 as you can get at the moment. So, I think that here's the interesting thing. When you add up all the... Oh, final factor. It's experience, it's it factor, it's clutch factor. Right, in terms of experience, I actually think it's pretty even between the two teams again. Sure, Fops isn't very experienced, but then it's not like Kirby has insane amounts of experience. He has a decent amount from Astralis, but you look at the rest of the players, Glaive doesn't have as much as Fallen in terms of the modern day. The rest of the players all have a lot of experience. Obviously, these teams have all won a number of tournaments. Now, in terms of it factor, clutch factor, that goes heavily to SK. That's one of the reasons why I think this SK could go down as the best team of all time if they can win this major and continue on to win tournaments, because they are one of the most clutch teams I've ever seen in CSGO. They're amazing. And the idea that they're this clutch and this skilled almost seems unfair. Usually the two don't go in hand in the same way. So they are bonkers in terms of how clutch they are, and clutch as a team. Like, once you get Fur and Cold Zero and Fallen into those late rounds, 14-14 games or overtime they just come alive. They make plays where other people, including an Astralis, it's not that Astralis chokes anymore, but Astralis will play conservative. They will look for the opponent to make mistakes, and they will then try and exploit them, and they'll try and remove choking factors by playing fundamentally sound Counter-Strike. Now, if SK makes mistakes and they play under par, yeah, you'll win. But SK, because they've got such great playmakers and some of the best players in the world right now, and some of those clutch players, they often actually exploit the more predictable style of Astralis in those moments. So yes, that factor goes to SK by a good margin, actually, not a small margin. Now, in terms of the style, I think Astralis' style is more consistent. That's why I'm almost certain Astralis will give SK a great game here. SK has the more heavy hitting style, but Astralis has the more consistent style, where on every map they play in the series, this is a key detail, as long as SK don't pick cash, then on all 3 maps, Astralis has a chance to win. Now, that doesn't necessarily apply to SK, because I think SK on Overpass won't really be that good. I think that should be a clear win for Astralis, and I think that SK knows that deep down and are relying on the other 2 maps. So that's what's interesting, is there is a style mismatch, but each style has its own different win conditions. Now, in terms of this series, overall factors, right, map pool goes slightly to SK. Not just because of the wins that they've gotten, but overall they have a slightly better map pool, even though Astralis can play a lot of maps. Astralis can kind of play 5 maps well. SK can play 5 maps well, but some of them exceptionally well. Astralis only really has exceptional performances on Overpass at the moment. They're very good on the other maps, but not against the elite teams in general. Then you go and you look in terms of the maps that will come out. I actually think in one sense Astralis has the advantage. They can play all three, but I think the SK will win there too, and therefore they will have the advantage there overall, a slight advantage. In terms of skill, I actually think it's pretty much as close to 50-50 as you can get, because it's two different types of advantage. Better stars, but better overall team, man for man. I feel like that's just a wash on that one. And then in terms of clutch factor, it factor, I feel like that goes to SK by a good margin. And then in terms of style, I think overall style, I would go ahead and give to Astralis. Like if Astralis can front run in any of these games and get up like 10-4, get up like 9-2 in halves, they can just win maps outright. Whereas SK, they're going to win in the deep water. So I think in terms of style, I give it slightly to Astralis. So if you add all those factors up, I feel like, yes, enough factors go to SK that SK should win this series 2-1. And I feel like the key player, as he was in the past series, will be Fur. It's all on Fur for me. I feel like if he plays very well, that he is the one that's going to torture Astralis. He's going to really disrupt their CT economy. And they're not a team who's going to do ridiculous force buys in the same way. So you really can impact them through their economy. Now, over on the Astralis side of things, first of all, if Xyp9x is just wins some clutches, that's going to be a big factor. But secondly, as good as Device is, he's already one of the best players of all time. He's already a player who's played incredible in majors even. He's still, when he's played the best teams in majors, hasn't always gotten to the god tier level that he can against other teams sometimes. He's still waiting to really overcome all the choking issues. Like he doesn't really choke as much now, but there'll be games that it happens. If he ever unlocks that, which you can never know he can, and he certainly can't bank on it, that will be a deciding factor that can certainly give Astralis the win. And he's still a very dynamic, very dangerous player in this series. And crucially, when he plays against Fallen, I feel like he's actually reverted that. Inverted it rather, where before I thought Fallen really had a good read on him and got the better of him. I think now actually Device outdoes Fallen. That's the reason why I think Fallen's not as great when they play in these series now. But the problem is, I think Fur's better than Kirby at the moment. So Dupree is also an interesting factor because how well he's playing at this tournament, but there's going to be a lot of pressure on him to win clutches if Xyp9x isn't going to turn up. So overall, I think SK is going to win this one, but I think it's one of the closest series I have ever seen in Counter-Strike. So many factors that are so razor thin or going slightly one way or the other way. I think the history is very fascinating and will play out very similarly. There won't be too many surprises, I think. And I think it should be a great game. Like for me, this is the final of the tournament, and I'm really looking forward to watching it. Now then, let's go. And I said I would do it before, so let's go and let's actually make some bets, shall we? So, okay, here we are. We're on ESP. So you can just go to ESP.bet or you can go to ESP.io/ThorinESP, which will take you to the same site, but through my campaign. It'll be a link in the description box below. It's easy, just click that. So you're going to go here. We're going to go up here. We're going to pick Betting Lounge. And I'm going to bet on the games. So actually, I'll just bet on the first two games. And I'm going to go ahead and say CSGO. So there we go. Right, here's the interesting part. Obviously, the odds are going to be different when you log into the site because they're based on who's betting on which team. Now, interestingly enough, I'm actually going to be able to now bet on Gambit as the underdog because they're a 49% here. And FNATIC's actually a slight edge because FNATIC's been playing so well, and people know classically FNATIC beats them. FNATIC beat them the last time they played. So I'm loving the fact that I can actually bet on the team I think is going to win the series, and I have the better odds. So I'm going to go ahead and bet on Gambit, and I'll bet €2. So I'll make bet there. And then in terms of, there's obviously some side bets you can do. So for map 1 of the series, I mean, I can't know which map that's going to be, can I? Within the first 30 maps, which team will win 16? Right. I actually think it's possible Gambit can 2-0. So this is a good one for me to go ahead and bet Gambit. So I'm going to bet Gambit. I'm going to bet €1. Because like I said, I think Gambit can 2-0. Oh, it's going to the side thing over here. Right. What else? Which team will get the first kill of this match? Goes to if the series, in a series of more than one game between two, which team will win the second match? I also think Gambit's going to win 2-0. So I'll go ahead and say that. I'll bet Gambit for that one as well. Right. I'll make this so I have the SK one available in a second. So I'll just go ahead and bet these two. Right, now I'm going to bet this one. Now here's what I love. So I just told you it's going to be incredibly close. I just told you the factors make it so that absolutely Astralis can win, but SK is the favourite. But SK is playing so well. Coldzera's playing so well. Fur's very good. Phelps is out of his mind. Just set the record for individual kills in regulation in a major game. So everyone's betting on SK. So I don't know what the odds are going to be like when you get here, but I'm personally going to bet on Astralis because those odds are fucking bonkers. I basically have, this is like 70-30, and Astralis is way more than a 30% chance to win this match in my opinion. And so, and by the way, for that one, the reason I didn't give you intuition is that because part of my intuition tells me SK will win because they're so good in the clutch. Like, yes, I want Astralis to win because I like to see their style of play happen. I mean, I guess I don't really know if I want them to actually, because I like SK as well as a team. I mean, they're an all-time great team. So actually, I always feel like on those ones, you shouldn't really listen to your intuition because if you just like the team, you're going to want them to win, aren't you? So I'm actually going to bet on Astralis here. And since it's literally less than 30%, I've got 29%. I'll say, fuck it, let's go big. Let's go $10 here. About 10 euros. Forgot I hadn't done my Brexit yet. Right, so I've done that. I've actually bumped the odds right up there. Right, so there we go. I've made my bets. You can do it yourself if you want ESP.bet. Regardless, be sure to watch, like the Gambit one, I think will be interesting because I think it can be like a moment where Zeus gets an epic run without Na'Vi and he can really show what a great leader he is. And I think Adren's primed to have a fantastic match and a go up into the semi-finals. But Fnatic are the legends and they still have classic players and they still have it in big moments. And that's going to be a tough ask to beat them. Then in terms of SK-Astralis, that's going to be one of the best matches of the year. That can be an absolutely incredible game. I can't wait to watch it. I'm going to be sitting there loving it all, probably tweeting out, as you know I am wont to do. And I just hope it's a great game. I don't care who wins the game as long as it's a great game. I want it to be 3 maps, and I want it to be 3 epic maps, particularly if they play Mirage and Inferno. I want those to be 2 of the best maps I've ever seen. And I think there's potential for this to be amazing because of the difference in terms of, you notice in every aspect, they all had a different strength in a different way for those 2 teams. And I think whoever wins this wins the major. So this, for me, is the real final. And it's the match I've been looking forward to watching for a long time.
I'm Device from Astralis, and welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. It's a choke-free zone.